There are intergenerational bloodline banking families. They exist. They're very particular about their bloodlines. They're protective of it. They're the ones that get concerned about it. I mean, we talk about it because it's fascinating, but they're obsessive. And people have heard that term blue blood and things like that. There's some real sketchiness about the origins of some of these families, but a lot of it is banking wealth that's been passed down, and secret societies play a role in this. Now, there's a couple things that just need to be said. You don't have to necessarily have a great big meeting with all the 13 families, so to speak, involved to plot out what you're going to do to benefit everybody. They know what benefits them. They already know what they need to do, and they're all working maybe together, maybe not, but they're going to do what they need to do to benefit them. So they don't need to have a big meeting. But that being said, they do. They have these meetings all the time. Maybe not their representatives have these meetings, I should say. The real power players send their representatives to Bilderberg and to Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission and Lacerkel and the Committee of 300 and groups like that, World Economic Forum, Royal Institute of International Affairs. These are the groups that plan how the world is run. And they had always had a goal of a world government. But the more they sort of tried to put that together, the more obvious it became that maybe outright world government isn't the best strategy, but what about world governance? So like rule by policy, not rule by military. Washington, D.C. offers sociopaths everything that they could possibly want. And so it's like a magnet for them. And that what I came to understand was that it's not a black mark on your permanent record to be some dirty pedophile. It actually puts you in consideration for the top job because they need degenerate scumbags in those positions and they need to have the goods on them. I already knew that the pharmaceutical industry was a dangerous drug cartel and that all the major companies inside of Big Pharma are all convicted felons, like convicted in court of felonies, but nobody ever goes to prison. They just pay fines and they get off.
Welcome to Discourse with Christian. I'm your host, Christian White, and today's guest is Charlie Robinson. Charlie is the author of The Octopus of Global Control. He also possesses a background in real estate and such, a multifaceted individual. Honored to have him on the show, and wanted to give out a shout out to Doug McKenty. I came across Charlie on his show, which was called The Shift. And so it's an honor to meet you, virtually, Charlie.
Nice to meet you too. I've been catching your work is being suggested to me, by the way, on YouTube. So I started watching your videos, and then all of a sudden you reached out to me, and I was like, "Hey, I just saw Tom Luongo on your show, going on a mad bender as he does." I wouldn't want Tom Luongo any other way than on a mad bender, but he was going off, and I was like, hey. So I started watching the show. When you reached out to me, I was like, I'm really glad you reached out to me. It's very synchronistic. So we're already off to a good start. And of course, Doug McKenty's fantastic. I've known him for years, and he's just a real thoughtful, introspective guy who's got a long background in radio. That's why he sounds as professional as he does. We could all learn a thing or two from Doug McKenty, and I've had the pleasure to get to know him over the years. I really like him a lot. So I'm glad you found me, however you found me, but especially finding me through Doug, because I feel like whenever he and I had conversations, that we always kind of just went wherever the flow took us. And Doug's a pretty thoughtful guy. So sometimes our talks are pretty heavy.
Absolutely. Well, I want to mention, his show in particular. I mean, apart from you being on it, just some fascinating guests on there. And as I'm finding, as I've been sharing with people in the audience, I started my journey, as far as doing a show and put myself out there, as well as it all started from learn how to freaking invest a bit, better and figure things out on that end. Sound money, then private central banks. Well, what are, what are these banks? Then you start hearing about, different power structures. Okay. Then you hear about, and then it starts going down different rabbit holes. You're like, okay, this is kind of out there. But then as I am reading and kind of connecting the dots, I'm like, okay, there's definitely some merit here to this. And I just think it's so my world, I've done a complete 180, Charlie, in terms of how I look at things. It's had a profound impact on me. It's fascinating. So obviously I wanted to invite you on to hear your latest thoughts on where you think we are globally, perhaps, societally, wherever you want to take it. And then, of course, at some point, would love to hear about your book and the thesis of it.
Isn't it funny that we both kind of started off on the same trajectory? It's like, I need to learn about money. I'd been working in real estate in Las Vegas from 2003 to 2012, during the boom and bust. And during that, in 2007, somebody suggested John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, to me. And I read that and it changed my life. I thought, oh my God, I had no idea. I knew that these groups were bad, but the idea, and I knew central banking was bad, but the idea of loaning money to countries and getting them in debt and then extracting something from them, I thought it was fascinating to me. And then the bust happened, and I was working in the industry with my eyes wide open, I thought, and I couldn't see it coming. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to stay frothy forever, but the way it changed and how quickly it changed, it happened so fast, it caught me off guard, and I wound up losing both of my houses. And I was determined to not be a sucker anymore. Like I felt like I was playing 3-card money, and I was just like, I don't understand how the game is set up. .com stocks, just like you make a little money and then boom, it all falls out. Housing market, make a little bit of money, you think, and then it all falls out. I just don't know. I don't know how money works. And so I had to learn that. I had to go back and watch Mike Maloney's money videos and things like that, and start and read about the Federal Reserve, and oh my God, it's a private central bank, and G. Edward Griffin's books, and everything that kind of takes you down, as you mentioned, that rabbit hole. So whatever gets you there. Now, I already knew that 9/11 was wonky, and I had no love for our government at all, but I didn't understand the depths of how it was connected until I really understood the money. And that was just a real obvious missing piece. And once I got a handle on that, things started to make more sense. And so I started down this path just trying to figure it out for myself. And I had no interest or desire to have any sort of role in this, whatever this is, alternative media, writing books, things like that. I just wanted to know how things worked. And so during a conversation with my mother years ago, in like 2015, I was telling her about some great conspiracy I just found, and she's like, "This is fascinating stuff. It's like really interesting, and you have a way of explaining it that makes sense. I get it." And she's like, "But what are you gonna do with it? Like now that you know this, like now what?" I was like, "I don't know. I mean, I didn't think there was anything I needed to do with it. It was just for me." And so I thought, but there was like an easy question and I didn't have an answer for it. So I started to think about like, well, what would I do? What could I do? I love documentaries. I'd love to make a documentary, but I'm not really a filmmaker and don't know, how to do the editing. And there were some pretty obvious barriers there. But when it came to writing, I thought, well, I think I could write, and I think I can write in a way that's kind of both educational and snarky and kind of shitty at the same time. Have like a dark sense of humor about it. So what I did was I started writing my first book, and I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody at first because I thought that I didn't want to have unrealistic expectations for myself and tell all my buddies, "Hey, I'm writing a book," and then have them ask me about it a year later. "How's the book coming?" And they go, "Well, I never finished it." So I just didn't say anything. And then like halfway through writing it, I still kept it under wraps, but my reasoning changed. And I went from worrying about whether I'd finished the book to knowing that I was onto something. And I didn't want somebody to come in and stop me. I didn't want somebody to ask me another simple question like, what are you going to do with this book once it's written? You don't know anybody. Are you going to sell it on the street corners? Or are you going to, it's like, no, I'm going to go on podcasts and talk about it. And I'm going to tell anybody who will listen, I mean, that was sort of my thing. So I didn't tell anybody. So the book came out in 2017. My wife was not thrilled when she found out that I had written this book behind her back. But ultimately, I wound up going on podcasts to promote it and got very lucky. Right off the bat, I got asked to be on Coast to Coast AM, which is like legendary. I mean, I've been listening to Coast to Coast since when I was in college and stuff. So to be asked to invited to come on was a big deal for me. And of course, it kind of, in my mind, at least, it sort of validated what I was working on. I was like, all right, this isn't too crazy. I'm talking to millions of people here in this radio show. So it gave me a little bit more energy to say, all right, this is doable. I'll go talk to everybody. So I started the process of getting on shows, inviting myself onto people's shows and saying, I've got this book. I'd love to talk to you about it. And that turned into doing so many of those interviews and doing them with the right people that I wound up with a guy named Tony Merkel who does a show called The Confessionals, which is like Bigfoot and ghost stories. And it's really not geopolitics all that much, but he heard me and he said, I'd love for you to come on and just talk about what you wrote in this book. I think even though it's not exactly what we cover, I think it would be good. And after we got done, Tony was like, you need to do a podcast. He's like, you really should do it. And I was like, well, I don't know how to do all the engineering. He's like, I'll do that. But like, if you could focus on just doing it, then I think you would have something. And so I initially kind of said, well, I don't think so. But thought about it a little more and wound up starting my own podcast in March of 2020, like right when COVID kicked off. We had planned it a couple of months earlier, so we didn't mean to time it with that. And that's when I launched Macroaggressions. And now I'm like 560 episodes in and 5+ years into it. And it's been the best thing ever. But like, I wouldn't have known, I didn't write a business plan. There wasn't like much thought that went into this. It was very reactive. Like, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to promote it. And then what? Well, we'll see what happens when I get there, So it's been that kind of thing. And it turns out I'm a writer. I didn't know it. I always thought I was just a real estate guy, but I had this latent talent that I tapped into, and I really enjoy writing. And that turned into the podcast. And then the podcast turned into this year, buying the independent news site Activist Post, which has been it'd been online for 15 years. This legendary site that I love and have been using forever to research things. They approached me and said, would you be interested in buying the company? Because I think we're sort of at the end here of our mission. And I said no. And then 2 days later, I said yes. And so I wound up buying Activist Post in an all Bitcoin transaction and starting that and rebuilding the website and launching that January 1st of 2025. So it's been like the craziest run that I just could have never predicted any of this. I simply set out to write a book to explain the things that I saw, and it connected with people in a way that I was very pleased with, but honestly, if I'm surprised too, because as you know, like, this information is like, it's not for everybody, and you can start to talk about this with the wrong person, and next thing you know, you're not talking to those people anymore. So it's been a trip, but boy, I'll tell you what, it's the most enjoyable work I've had. And that's not saying much. Real estate's not that enjoyable, but it's the barrier, the bar is set rather low on this one. But it's just been so fulfilling and so interesting to do this. So I never thought I'd be in a position where then, like, to wrap this whole thing up full circle, is that now with my podcast, I have had on multiple occasions John Perkins, author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the book that I read in 2007 that changed my life. And I've been able to tell him how important that is. And what's weird to me, I mean, I'm grateful for it, but totally weird, is that I'll meet people at festivals and conferences and things like that, and they'll talk to me about the Octopus of Global Control, my book from 2017, and they'll say the things to me that I was saying to John Perkins. I'm just like, oh my God, this is wild now. Like, people are like, hey, your book changed my life. I was like, well, thank you. And I know what that feels like because John Perkins' book changed my life too. So it's been very rewarding, not financially, of course, because alternative media, there's not a lot of money here, but rewarding in just about every other way, man. It's just been quite a trip.
Yeah. Obviously you've been doing this way longer than I have, in terms of being in the space, but even in the short period of time that I've been kind of entering it more and more, it's been, as mentioned, it's completely changed the way I look at life from, just the matrix that society inculcates us in at such an early age. And, you know, I'm in my early 30s, so I'll give you and the viewers a reference point. I think about, or just all of us at some point growing up, we all look up to those older than us, those teachers, this or that. And I think about, I'm not putting them all on blast and such, but just how they themselves were inculcated. They don't even know. It just blows my mind. I mean, and just the matrix and how they suck people into it. And I'm kind of deviating for a moment, but just, I look at, like, you and I are both, California guys and such, right? Southern California, right? Uh, uh, um, consumption, right? Got to get this, got to keep up with the Joneses, got to do this, got to do that. Uh, um, you know, whether it's credit card or this or that, and got to get this super sexy, high paying job, and got to be slammed and pressured. And then if you're anxiety, depression, or whatever, here's some pharmaceuticals, here's this, and then take some intoxicants, and just, you see so much in society. And the more and more I become unplugged, I'm just like, I just want to get away from everything. I just want to live rural, like Doug Casey.
Well, funny you mentioned Doug Casey. um, I met Doug Casey through Jeff Berwick. Jeff Berwick runs the Dollar Vigilante, and I've been watching Jeff for years and years, right? And when I was promoting the Octopus book, I reached out to Jeff to see if he'd be interested in having me on the Anarchast when he was hosting that. And he's since turned that over to other hosts, but at the time it was his show and he was hosting it from Acapulco, Mexico, and he had this great background behind him, and it's just really like a kind of a legendary setup that he's got. And he had me on. We had a great conversation. And Jeff credits Doug Casey with turning him into an anarchist. Well, at least identifying him as being an anarchist. Back in 2002, he said he was having dinner with Doug, and Doug goes, you know what you are, Jeff? You're an anarchist. And Jeff's like, what's an anarchist? And so I got to know Jeff pretty well. And Jeff and I wrote a book together. And that's called The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. And Doug Casey wrote the foreword to it. So my connection to Doug is through that. It's like when you need somebody who's going to understand the source material and just start the book off on the right foot, it's like, got to give it to Doug Casey. So anyway, Doug has been like I don't know, like a mentor to, I mean, I don't know him super well, but I mean, I look to Doug Casey for a lot of like, what would Doug do in this situation right here? Doug would probably not get too bent out of shape about it. He'd find the humor in this somehow, some way. So, and now currently, even though, Doug wrote that foreword 5 years ago for us, with Activist Post, I republish articles from International Man, which is Doug Casey's publication, and also Crisis Investing with Doug and Matt Smith, who have this great podcast together where they just get together and sometimes read emails from people and answer these questions. It's just a hang session for an hour or so, and it's fantastic. So I get a chance to still support Doug's work after all these years. He's he's fantastic, man. People could learn a lot from just watching his interviews. And then, he writes fiction books, but I don't think they're too fictional. I think they're based on him. I'm pretty sure they're based on him.
Yeah, as it relates to Doug Casey, he was literally one of the first people. Him and I started listening to David Lynch. This was literally last summer. I started listening, and this is what I was figuring out what I wanted to do, and I had to make a pivot, and without boring people, and I had extra time. I was like, I'll listen and listen to something. And yes, yeah, Doug has played a huge role. I haven't been able to get. I don't even have his email because I haven't been able to get a hold of him for the show, but one of the things I want to compliment him on, and Matt Smith, for their Doug Casey stake, which I recommend the audience to check out. One of the things I really like what they do, Charlie, is they turn something that may otherwise be only that may only appeal to an esoteric segment of the population, if you will, or and I feel like they make it very palatable. I'm trying to think of who else does a good job, like Dave Collum, I think Tom Luongo. Certain people, they do a really great job of turning something that may otherwise, like something very finance, and make it so relatable and engaging and interesting. I think and that's what I'm trying to do with my show. Is like I used to be like more macro finance, and I'm like, okay, I want it. I want it to be more relatable and resonate with everybody, not just like a small minority.
Yeah, it's tough to make central banking interesting, but it's so important to us, to understanding how it all runs, that you can kind of I can kind of geek out a little bit now at the magic of it all. But yeah, it's tough to make banking interesting for a lot of people. And I think that's part of the cover too. It's like, it's just banks. Who cares about banks? When my octopus book, I identify 8 tentacles, banking being one of them, and military being another one. And through the course of having conversations with people about the books, and sort of like forcing me to rank which is the most dangerous, I put banking at the top, ahead of the military, because without the banks, there's no military. So, and they're the ones that they can make some decisions that lead to mass starvation. I mean, diabolical people, the bankers. And I never thought that. So it's funny, is along my journey through figuring this all out, to the extent that I can, um, I've had to learn more about banking than I ever wanted to. And I have talked to more people on my podcast about farming than I ever thought I would. And honestly, I do it. At first, I thought it might even be against my will, but I just keep having people on that are growing their own food and talking about this, and they're into such interesting topics, and they've got such different setups. And I just thought, boy, you know what? Here I am. I come out of the sports world, and I'm talking about politics and farming and central banking. And I never would have thought I would do this. So, sort of like a second encore career for me that I started a decade ago. But here we are, talking about
Well,
talking about farming, talking to cattle farmers who are like, hey, I can sell you like a half of a cow, and you're just like, I never thought I would have this conversation in living in Newport Beach. I'm like, talking about, we're going to get a half a cow here. Why? We just go to the grocery store. So anyway, it's just everything has changed in my life, and you mentioned California too, and because we both come from there, it could be a very unhealthy place to live mentally. There's a lot of pressure to, and I know it sounds ridiculous that you allow other people to put pressure on you, but there is a lot of pressure living in Southern California to sort of fit in. And anyway, so people wind up prioritizing things that they shouldn't. And so I don't blame you for wanting to move away from there. As much as I loved it, and it was great growing up there when I did, it has changed, and it has been an embarrassment. And California has been a sad sort of, like San Francisco in particular has been like a terrarium of bad democratic decisions that you can just watch with your own eyes, like a live sim game, like Sim City, San Francisco. Like, what happens if we reduce the police and then increase all of these people, and then we add drugs, and then we add What do you think is going to happen? I don't know. A doom loop, you know? Yeah, probably.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I haven't been at this. I was over in Sanford. This is when I was still in commercial real estate. I was over in SF, and I just remember this is during COVID, right? So everyone's eating out on the streets, right, where they have those little booths and such. And I just remember being approached by a homeless person. And the first time I've had that happen, like while I'm eating, and I'm like, I'm trying to eat, like, you know, take take care or whatever. And then yeah, the homeless, they're driving through LA and such, in parts. It's asinine. It is outright like diabolical what they've done to the state. It's insane.
We were always sort of threatened, maybe promised a big earthquake that was going to knock California off into the ocean. We didn't get it. Ironically, what we got wasn't natural disasters. It was all political. It was all decisions made by Democratic government. And I'm no Republican. I'm the MC of the largest anarchist conference in the world. So when I criticize the left, I don't want people to mistakenly assume I'm on the right. But it is undeniable that the democratic policies that have run San Francisco for a long time are just anchored in fantastical thinking and magical fairy dust, and not not based on reality. And it's been crazy to watch. It's been sad to watch. I mean, like in Southern California, like Santa Monica had always had a very lax relationship with the homeless population. So it always been kind of normalized there. Even a little to the south in Venice Beach too. You just wouldn't go there maybe at night. But it wasn't like dangerous during the day. It was a trip, a freak show, but it wasn't like dangerous. But now, I'll be out in Southern California in a couple of weeks, and unfortunately, it's not what it was when I was there, when I was living there a while ago. And it's a shame because it's such a beautiful place, and it has such potential to be great, but they've just allowed these woke policies and just a perpetual group of criminals through there with the Kamala Harris's and Gavin Newsom's and Pelosi factions. That whole group there is it's just like a criminal cartel operating out of San Francisco, using the Democratic Party as like a shield or something, or accessories, So it's been frustrating to watch it. I live in Colorado now, and I have for a while. And of course, there's big problems in Denver. But outside of that, you can get to a place where you're not overwhelmed by people, and it's refreshing. And I might not have liked it as much when I was younger and wanted to be around all the action, but now in my 50s, it's like, this is way better. I'm fine. I don't need to be with all the people. So, and also, like, to be honest, the work I do, it's like I'm just writing about or talking about the worst people in the world all day long. So, which makes me not really super social afterwards. I'm like, I kind of just want to chill out and watch football and not deal with it, not go out and interact with other people. So I don't know. It's that balance where I'm like, okay, get the information without inundating myself and making myself, feel bad because I'm internalizing all of the grief and sadness in the world. Like, I can't do that. It's too much.
Yeah, I find that with myself as well. Sometimes I think about the I think about the titles to the YouTube videos that I produce, and for the Spotify, where it's like, we're in World War III, and then I think, okay, am I helping to bring this about by talking? So and then sometimes it does sound really negative, when you think about how sinister some of the decision makers are in this world, and then I'm okay. Well, how can I put kind of more of a positive spin on it? I think Francis Hunt does a really great job. For those who listen to him, he'll while he'll go off and talk about, hey, we've got this going on, that he'll always try and end it on a positive note, and I like that, and I think that's so important. Wanted to mention, you also mentioned about farming and ag, and how you were wondering, like, why, how did this enter the foray, if you will? And I wanted to comment that, having been a guy, Southern, Newport Beach area, um, how wanting to live a certain lifestyle, right? Whether it's Newport Coast or the Bentley or this or that, to now rural, several acres, have a little villa, just get away from everything. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's, mental shift, but I love that. And Doug Casey talks a lot about that.
Yeah. It comes, I think it comes with like preparedness. You start to be aware of your surroundings. You're like, all right, am I in the right spot for me? Like, what if something bad happens here? Am I where I should be? And, a lot of times the answer is no. But also people are like, yeah, but I can't leave. I've got kids or whatever. They've got reasons why they can't go. But some people do. Some people plan and I mean, we saw what happened during COVID in California with the mass exodus, and people were going to any place where they thought they could even get a whiff of freedom. So they're like, I'm leaving Laguna Beach and moving to Boise, Idaho. It's like, have you been to Boise, Idaho? Are you really going to do this? Because it's going to be a big shock. And so people were leaving and moving to different states like crazy. But on top of that, one of the things that they were also doing, and I work with a company, a real estate development company in Central America, who does residency programs. A lot of people were planning their escape, not just out of the state, but out of the country. They were looking at options. And see, the thing that you find when you start looking at that as a plan B is that the problem isn't getting to the place you want to go to. The problem is staying, being allowed to legally. And so you have to kind of think about these things. And Doug Casey's obviously great at this, talking about um, planting flags in multiple jurisdictions. Maybe that's corporations, maybe it's citizenship, passports, residency, whatever it is. But the minute you start thinking about, the minute you recognize that there's a problem where you are, you start looking for solutions and plotting this, then you eventually find uh, these opportunities to say, yeah, man, like I want to pack up and leave and go someplace where I have some land. Where is that? Is that Belize? Is that Nicaragua? Is that Honduras? Is it Costa Rica? Is it Panama? Is it? And so I know a company that does fantastic real estate development down there, which I'm into because I like real estate, but also they have a legal team that sets up residency. When you buy the place, you also are setting up residency. Oh, and by the way, he's, as the owner of this company, and I have a meeting every year in Mexico in Acapulco, because he's always there sponsoring. I'm always there emceeing it. So we set a day and have a breakfast meeting where I get caught up on all the things that they're doing. Well, one of the things that they're doing is so smart. They bought a bunch of land and planted teak trees, and it takes 25 years for these trees to grow. But what they did is they fractionalized the investment of the forest that they own into small chunks, like $20,000, $25,000 investment chunks that you got to sit on for 20 years, 25 years. And which is one thing. That's just like an investment part, and people can be into that if they want to. But it gives you the opportunity, makes you eligible to get residency, even though it's just this little piece of like teak forest that you're obviously not going to put a tent on and live there. But you qualify for residency. And so they can set that up. And so it's like, well, now it's like, I don't have $500,000 to buy a place in St. Kitts and get residency that way. He's like, you don't have to. You can get teak and set this up. It's a great investment. You can set it and forget it. You don't have to think about it. It'll pay off in 25 years. We'll call you when it's ready. But like in the meantime, you can be a resident in Belize or Nicaragua or Panama or Costa Rica. And it's like, oh, okay. So like the more you start to prepare yourself for this, the more you find these really interesting opportunities everywhere. So when you say Doug Casey, looking around and finding places to be, Yeah, it's turned into cottage industry. There's a lot of people out there that can help you get a second passport. And I'm glad that there are.
Yeah, I can't imagine when things eventually do well, when something does happen, whether there's a whether the grid goes out or there's some other conundrum or such, being in a jungle, I'm trying to think of it, like a cement jungle like New York, or if you will, or in LA, or in some other area. I mean, good luck getting out, trying to get out of there if you need to get out there fast.
And it didn't set anybody's mind at ease that the city of New York was running these weird public service announcements like 2 years ago that on television, and people can pull them up, talking about like, if you see a mushroom cloud, what you want to do is wet your towels and put them up against the door. And you're like, why are we seeing this? What are we doing? Are we going to get under our desks and cover our heads? I mean, are we doing this again? Like, what are we talking about here? So like, yeah, I don't feel good about the situation that's coming. I don't I don't like the predictive programming that the city of New York is putting out about potential mushroom clouds and what to do in the event of it. What to do in the event of a mushroom cloud in New York City? Well, I don't know. Kiss your ass goodbye. I mean, if the explosion doesn't get you, just being there for a couple of weeks trying to fight it's bad enough on a normal Tuesday in New York City. You add a nuclear bomb to that. I mean, come on, it's crazy.
Well, as it relates to that, there's obviously, nuclear stuff and things of that nature. Trump is of course in talks with Putin. What are your thoughts on that, and where we are headed, more or less?
Well, it's theater to me. It just feels like theater. I mean, Putin made a comment several years ago, and he was talking about dealing with American presidents, and he said it doesn't really matter who's in that office over there. I can work with any of them. In the end, they come in with their ideas, and then they're visited by men in black suits, and then those ideas go away. And when he said that, everybody, I think, probably assumed men in black suits. I mean, it's CIA, right? But I took it as Chabad Lubavitch, which are the men in black suits with the black hats as well. And Putin would know because there's the picture of him with all of them as well. And so I think that when he's talking about presidents coming into office and having ideas, and then the man in black suits showing up, I'm talking about the Zionism component of this and their influence on it. And they've got Trump, that's obvious, but they've also got Putin in a less obvious way. He has been working with them for a long, long time, and he is in some respects in power, at least to some degree, at their approval, because they're a very powerful group. And so I think that when I see two guys getting together to talk about what's going to happen, in Alaska, and I know that they're both being controlled by external forces, then get I don't hold my breath, and I mean I don't think that we're going to be seeing anything other than what is best for that group. And if that means a continuation of this war until Ukraine is utterly obliterated, then it will continue. If it means that it wraps up tomorrow, it's whatever those guys tell them to do. So I mean, I'm interested in what the final outcome is, but I don't get too excited about political leaders talking about the decisions that they're making, because I don't believe that it's their decisions to make. I believe that they are working at the behest of a supranational group that controls them, and that they are there as the characters in the play, and they provide window dressing, and they provide a nice show for us to see, to make us think that our vote counts. But then, these guys all go play golf with each other. The Republicans, the red team and the blue team, they fighting against, how dare that Democrat say this about me? And then they're all in Palm Springs playing golf. So it's theater to me. And so I don't put too much stock in it. But of course, I'm anti-war at my core. So whatever stops the war, I'm in favor of. It should have never started, obviously, but that's a whole different story. But I am whatever, I'm in favor of whatever wraps up all the fighting all around the world as quickly as possible. But I'm also, unfortunately, a realist, and I think that that it doesn't matter what I think or what I want for the future of a place like Ukraine. I want those people to still be alive. I want whoever's left to still be alive, and I want everyone to go home. So, to the extent that they can.
Yeah, it's been amazing how many people have perished, how many people have been displaced. I can't imagine how much has been made amongst contractors. What I think about, what I try and think about more, Charlie, is even people outside of military contractors, people who are involved in healthcare, people, or medicine and trauma related stuff, and food, all the whole tamale, the whole cigar, as they say. I mean, and I'm trying to think, like you hear BlackRock and all these other companies. I don't know if I understood this correctly. BlackRock has a substantial stake in bonds there over in Ukraine, of course, apart from having interest in the resources there. I mean, it's I think Francis Hunt worded it as like a vampire buffet.
There's a lot of money in war. That's what I learned, and it's a stain on humanity that we've allowed the bankers to talk us into this. That they are, that we fight, that the poorest of the nation in every country are the ones that are in the military, and they fight on behalf of these groups, and they don't understand the bigger picture. It's one of those things where like you go through school and you learn history, air quotes, and then you get out, and if you really want to know what's happening in the world, then you have to unlearn just about everything that you thought you knew. And that's like a big task for people, and not everybody's equipped for that or wants to do it. So we wind up in a very small group of people who are willing and able to re-examine what they had been taught about how things worked, and like the way the world is, and like what happened during World War II, what happened during Vietnam, like what really happened. And, because you're like, well, I know what I was taught in these books. And you go, do you know who controls the books? And you're like, oh God, like you just start to ask these questions about like, and not everybody's ready to have those conversations or ask themselves these questions about like, do you really want to know what's happening? But if you're interested, and if you do want to know, it's more fascinating than you could possibly imagine. And the storylines of these intergenerational banking families and sort of shit that they've been up to over the years is just bonkers. And it's just I mean, I know people like science fiction. Like, you should read about the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Round Table and all that. Like, you don't need science fiction. These people are science fiction freaks themselves. They wrote the science fiction, actually, as a matter of fact. War of the Worlds and Brave New World, 1984. Like, they wrote all that stuff. It was just one group. So, like, I've been on a heater about this recently because I'm in the middle of writing a book on that sort of stuff. But it's just for those people that drift into our little world of like independent / alternative media stuff, whatever you want to call it. Like, there's so many fascinating topics that people can get hooked up into. like whatever brought you here, like maybe it's COVID, right? I mean, I think for the newest generation, it's COVID. It's like, something was wrong. I felt like they were lying to me. It's like, okay, welcome to the party. But like, if COVID wakes you up, then or if 9/11 wakes you up, which it was for me, you inevitably go, okay, if this is a lie, what else is a lie? And then that leads you somewhere else. So then it becomes more of like a personalized choose your adventure operation for you. You're like, what else is a lie? I'm interested in the wars. And you start to go down that and you start looking and you go, oh, wait a second. I have questions about the numbers of World War II. Like you start asking all kinds of questions. And like whatever got you to the party, great. But like once you're here, there's so many different topics that you can get into. And that was sort of actually the concept behind my first book, The Octopus of Global Control, was I wasn't going to do a super deep dive on any one tentacle. I broke it up into 8 tentacles. And then within that, about 50 different topics were covered. But what I did in order to kind of ease people into it and also to get them to believe that this stuff was actually going on was that I used 700 quotes from 500 different people who had a front row seat to what was going on in the world. And this is like Rothschilds and Rockefellers and Bushes and Clintons and all the people that you would expect, but also like George Carlin and Bill Hicks and Bill Cooper and, guys like that, Joe Rogan, like guys, the comedians who saw something from an interesting angle. So like it allowed me to tell the story of what this octopus is and how it controls the world. And then with these little quotes embedded in there that sort of hammers home whatever the point is that I'm making, where you as an example, you talk about the New World Order or something like that, and you go, "Oh, get out of here with that New World Order stuff, you conspiracy theorists." Like, no. Hang on. First of all, I didn't name them that. They named themselves that. And second of all, you remember George H.W. Bush, that crazy old man? He mentioned the New World Order over 200 times in his 4 years as president from 88 to 92. So like, I'm not the one bringing it up, that's it. And so like I was able to show these quotes, of like them talking about it, or, like there's and some of them are just bananas. Like you read through it and you go, this cannot be a real quote. I can't believe they wrote this. But it'd be like David Rockefeller quote. He says, some people have accused me. I feel like he should say it with an English accent, even though he's from New York. But some people have accused my family of being internationalists. He's like, and that we're plotting a world government, and that we're above. We control America, and we control the media, and we control the banks. If that's the charge, then I stand guilty and proud of it. And you're like, holy shit. And then you go, wait, he must have been like drunk and misquoted, right? You're like, no, it's page 405 of his autobiography where he wrote this, admitting to all of this, right? So it's like, I thought that for the book, I thought that the reason I did it the way I did was, it's like, don't take my word for it. Listen to them talk about it. Here, look, they'll tell you what they're doing. They'll talk about this stuff openly. Like, like here's a Kissinger memo from 74 that was totally classified and was never supposed to see the light of day, where he's talking about the American policy towards the third world should be, quote, that of depopulation, and then outlines 13 countries and says how they're going to depopulate it. And you go, oh my God. Like, has everybody seen this document? It's like, no, nobody's seen it. Nobody even knows it exists. It's like, they're admitting to murder here. It's like, yeah, and nobody cares. So it's like, that's kind of, that's like the stuff it's the stuff I've been working on recently has been about that. Like, you can find these guys admitting to all sorts of crazy things, and you Because otherwise everyone just assumes like, oh, it's a grand conspiracy. It's all hidden. You'll never connect the dots. It's like, oh, actually, a lot of these dots are already connected. They connected themselves. Like, it's not even all that hard. You just have to be looking for it. You don't even have to, it's only hidden to the extent that you're not looking for it. The minute you decide, I might look into this, it's like, oh, it's everywhere. I see it. It's here, and here are these guys talking about it. Here's Bill Gates talking about wanting to depopulate. You're like, why are you so on a bender about the vaccines? Oh, I don't know. Because Bill Gates said if we do a good job with our vaccination program, we can lower the world's population by 10 or 15%. That's why I'm worried about it. And he didn't get misquoted. He said it on camera in front of a bunch of people. So it's, so stuff like that. I've had to, I'll tell you what, man, actually the book, the format of the first book, I think people can relate to this, sort of came out of me wanting to create the ability for somebody to defend themselves in a conversation or an argument or a debate about this stuff, where you could say, hey, don't, let's look, it's right here. This is them saying it. If you, it hits you totally differently when you hear them talking about new world orders and world governments and they will have world government by consent or conquest. It's up to them. And you're just like, holy shit. We're up against some really dangerous people. But I just thought it was so nobody knows that these people are saying these things. If they knew that they had said them in the past, I think they would view them, they'd have to view them differently. And so I just am pretty good at compiling all these quotes in a way that they it's just hitting you over the head with it. By the time you're done, you're just like exhausted and kind of like laughing at the absurdity of it all. There's a real dark humor running through the book, which is, I think, kind of necessary because it's heavy topics, but it's like the whole theme of it is like, can you believe this shit? It's kind of like that. Like that's the tone, is like, can you believe this crazy shit? Look at us right here. So, and the audiobook. But here's the thing: when I did the audiobook, which I did last year for it, I was late to it. What I decided, which I thought was strategic and also just kind of funny on top of it, was I was like, this book has got a lot of really bad news in it. So I feel like I want it to be delivered by a nice voice. And so I know these Canadian guys, and they're super fantastic. And I just thought, a nice Canadian accent would deliver this bad news in a way that would make you kind of smile through the absurdity of it all. So my book is, so I've got actually 2 of my 3 books are narrated by one by each of these 2 Canadian guys, and they've run a podcasting company. They record audiobooks for a living too. I mean, it's one of the things that they do. And so it was great to have them do it. So I was like, that'll ease people into this. It won't be so doom and gloom. It'll be like kind of like happy dystopia, or, like polite dystopia, since it's Canadian.
Boy, well, I mean, shit, you mentioned several things. I mean, the first one is I can't believe Bill Gates openly said that. That's absolutely insane. Uh, what was the other thing? The military thing you mentioned about earlier and such. I wanted to comment. Again, I look back at my own from a very early age, just come from several generations military. Very early age, wanted to go do this. Went out I mean, just hook, line, and sinker, like really into it. Wanted to be a Navy SEAL. So I got my ass handed to me, and it did not work out in Coronado. And I look back, and I shared this on another podcast I did, which was this was from the author who wrote the book No Country for Old Men, and the quote is, make sure I'm hoping that I say it right. You never know what bad luck, or excuse me, you never know what worse luck your bad luck has saved you from. And I think about how, man, like had that maybe worked out, that career, maybe I'd still be in it. And now according to Martin Armstrong, things are supposed to be heating up from now going into next year. Think of a lot of other people I know in the military, people who are with the Marines and such. I mean, I don't know if this is a time to be in that. So complete about face, how I look at how I look at it. And I mean, God bless those people who are in uniform and such, but boy, it's the people that, the upper echelon, of this world. You also mentioned about, oh, another thing. You mentioned about how they're open about it. Rockefeller in his autobiography, mentioning what he said. Uh, I had someone else on. They said psychopaths and some of these people, they just are very open and transparent about it in a way where I think people are dismissive of it. They don't really, because it's just too open. It just seems too out there. And what I have found is, and again, you're way further down your research than I am, but what I'm finding is all the things that were conspiratorial, all the stuff is now seeing the light of day. The I think even the term conspirator, if I'm not mistaken, is derived from the Kennedy's assassination. That period. That you've got all the UAP stuff going on. I remember watching it, consuming that stuff as like 15 years ago, and family thinking like, "What the hell's wrong with you? Why are you watching that stuff like that?" And now they're like, "This is fascinating that they're having testimony in Congress talking about it."
Yeah, it's been there's so much going on right now. It's I feel kind of guilty as a writer because it's like I have an embarrassment of riches of things to talk about, or you know just after going through the COVID years and watching that and knowing what I knew going into it, like, oh God, this is just going to be so it's going to be awful, but at the same time, it's going to be like I felt like I was just sitting up in the cheap seats taking notes on everything about how actually I was writing a book about it while it was happening. I was just documenting everything that I could, every preposterous thing that was going on at the time. I just thought, I know this is terrible and people are suffering, but it is also simultaneously hilarious that they have convinced people to stand on a dot that's 6 feet away from another dot. And I experienced this when I was waiting to get on an airplane, which was no fun during that time to be flying, but where I'm waiting to get on the plane, and we're all seated, but every other seat has tape across it because you can't be sitting next to somebody. And so we're all sitting like this, like idiots. And I'm just looking around, just shaking my head like I can't. And then they say, all right, everybody line up. And so then everybody gets up and lines up. We're all right in a single file line. And then we get on the plane where we're 4 inches away from everybody. I was like, what are we doing? Like, what? I made a comment during one of my shows that if I kind of jokingly said, like, if the government came out, if they were dead serious about it, like in a coordinated way, and they came out and they said, okay, we have discovered that the COVID-19 virus hovers at about the 5 foot range due to its atomic weight. And the best way to avoid it when going into grocery stores is to get on your hands and knees and crawl into them and crawl throughout the store. If they had come out and said that, I think that they would have gotten at least half the people to do it without any of them putting up a fight. And it was, and so the entire COVID era to me was simultaneously hilarious and the most frustrating time to be alive, because we could see it crystal clear. And then there was another group of people who couldn't see it. And it made me think of this quote from the Octopus book in 2017 from Dr. Russell Blaylock, who's a neuroscientist. And he says, he's talking about, he says, the general public, he says the vast majority of people are stuck in a malaise. He says they can't excel. They're dependent on the government, and the government needs them. But he says, and then there's a small section, like a small percentage of people with much higher IQ that can see it all. They just can see the plan for what it is. It's just laid out right in front of them. But he said, I just thought it was interesting because he came at this from like a neuroscientific where he was just saying there's some people that just aren't equipped to see it. And I thought, oh, that might be the group that doesn't have the internal monologue or something along that line. You know what I mean? So I feel like we got I feel like the COVID era was like sold to us as a health emergency, but it was also like a psychological test at the same time. And I think, unfortunately, staggering percentages of people failed the test. And and are broken as a result of it. And while this whole thing is going on, I get turned on to Yuri Bezmenov's work, the former KGB agent who did some great interviews with G. Edward Griffin back in the 70s and 80s. And I started watching Yuri's presentations that he was giving, and he was talking about ideological subversion and how it's a 4-step process. And he laid it all out. And I was like, oh my God, this is COVID. Because the third step on it was a crisis. And he said the crisis has to last 6 weeks or longer. It's got to last at least 6 weeks. But he says after that, in the fourth stage, in the process of normalization, he said after that, after you've had the crisis, he said you take those people and I can shower them with authentic information. Won't make a difference. They're broken. They'll never come out of it. And I thought, oh my God. So it was like a psychological experiment on top of being everything else that it was.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was not aware of this at that time, and I ended up taking the Pfizer vaccine because I felt pressured at work. People were, and you know, yeah, they people were taking it, and I didn't want to be that guy where you killed grandma because you didn't take the vaccine, you didn't do this. And I remember at the time, my dad, believe it or not, or not that my dad per se, but he went out and he joined a protest, not like where they're like set like a Black Lives Matter kind of thing, but like off the street, just holding a sign. And I was just shocked that he did that. I was like, that doesn't even say, because my dad is about as straight laced as it is, and such. And but looking back, I'm like, good on fucking him. Good on fucking him for doing that. He did not take it. My mother did not take it. My sister was forced to take it for school. But as I become aware of how nefarious these people are, like in hindsight, I would have been leading the charge here locally. I'd be like, hell no, we're not playing this shit.
Yeah, it's a frustrating thing. I mean, I had an advantage in the sense that I already knew that the pharmaceutical industry was a dangerous drug cartel, and that all the major companies inside of big pharma are all convicted felons, like convicted in court of felonies, but nobody ever goes to prison. They just pay fines and they get off. And so I was all over the vaccine trip for 15 years. And so when COVID came, well, probably 10 years before, at least a good 10 years before COVID. And so when it came, we saw it coming. I told my friends in the summer of 2020, you're going to get a lot of pressure next year for a vaccine. It's going to come out of nowhere. They're going to say it's going to save everybody. It's going to be the craziest pressure campaign you've ever seen. And they're going to make you feel like you're a bad person if you don't do it, and all these things. And I had all my friends on a Zoom call, and I just said, please promise me that you will just call me before you make a decision to take any of these shots, because I have information that will be relevant to you. So, not going to turn this into a lecture. We were like doing an online poker game, where it was like a Zoom kind of online poker thing. And I had everybody there, and I was like, oh, this is a good time, since I've got you all here, to just say, I'm not going to give you the full lecture and turn this into some bummer, but like, I know shit that you don't know. It's going to be really bad. When it happens, you got to call me. None of them called me. They all took it. And I felt really demoralized, if I'm being honest about that, because it's like, what am I doing? Like, if I can't even reach my best friends, guys I've known my entire life who have absolutely no reason not to trust me, and so again, it goes back to that, like, what I learned during that era was how powerful psychological conditioning is, and how trauma is used to put people in a position to make short-term decisions at the expense of long-term ones, because they don't know if there's going to be a tomorrow, fight or flight sort of reactions and things like that. And increasing cortisol levels and putting people in really bad place physically, and this fear campaign and what that does to people psychologically and how that manifests. And like, boy, I mean, like, it's there's so much for somebody to unpack if they want to just take just the thread of the psychological angle of COVID, because there were so many tricks that they used against people. It was, I already despised the government, the media, and big pharma. But after what they did with COVID, I mean, if it were up to me, they would go up against the wall or be hanging from a tree for what they did, for the crime, for the children that died, who continue to suffer because of their poison. And the vaccines are the greatest scientific fraud in the history of modern medicine. And I think a lot of people unfortunately got that education later than they would have wanted to. But there's ways to mitigate it. There's people who are out there that are doing outstanding work with cleansing people's bodies. And just knowing that you if you've done that, if you're in a situation where you did that, like in your case, against your will and being forced and pressured into it, man, I don't envy anybody in that spot. I get it, man. There were some really awful decisions that had to be made. But if you were damaged by it, like, there are people out there that are helping, and there and I think it should go without saying, like, don't compound the mistake by taking any more. But there's people that can get you feeling better.
Yeah, I think the craziest thing is, how they if you work for somebody, if you're a provider, yeah, you don't take the vaccine, you don't do that, then they can completely, right, you're good, you're gone, and now you don't have a source of income. Next thing you know, you're divorced, you're getting slammed by the man, so to speak. It's just it I could go off in a million different directions. It's completely asinine. Um, as it relates to the people that fomented this, that helped to create this. Unless you wanted to dive more, continue on more on this thread, can you share with us, the audience, who you see at the top, of this pyramid of power, if you will? How would you define it? I've heard some people say secret societies, and for those in the audience that might roll their eyes, no, yes, I said that, secret societies, bloodline families. You hear people, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are intergenerational bloodline banking families. They exist. They're very particular about their bloodlines. They're protective of it. They're the ones that get um, you know concerned about it. I mean, we talk about it because it's fascinating, but they're obsessive about it. And people have heard that term blue blood and things like that. There's some real sketchiness about the origins of some of these families, but a lot of it is banking wealth that's been passed down, and it's and secret societies play a role in this. Now, there's a couple things that just need to be said. You don't have to necessarily have a great big meeting with all the 13 families, so to speak, involved, and to plot out what you're going to do to benefit everybody. They know what benefits them. They already know what they need to do, and they're all working, maybe together, maybe not, but they're going to do what they need to do to benefit them. So they don't need to have a big meeting. But that being said, they do. They have these meetings all the time. Maybe not their representatives have these meetings, I should say. The real power players send their representatives to Bilderberg and to Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission and Les Cirkel and the Committee of 300 and groups like that, World Economic Forum, the Royal Institute of International Affairs. These are the groups that plan how the world is run. And they had always had a goal of a world government. But the more they sort of tried to put that together, the more obvious it became that maybe outright world government isn't the best strategy, but what about world governance? So, like, rule by policy, not rule by military. And so they set about grouping countries together um, through policy. We've seen them try to do it, and everyone goes, "Oh, yeah, world government, world governance, that'll never work." It almost happened last year with the World Health Organization. They tried to take control of the of above the American government. Had we signed that legislation, they would have had authority over the United States and every country in the world in the case of a international pandemic, that they themselves would be the arbiters of when that was happening. They would be the ones that would deem it whether or not it was a pandemic. And when they said it was, then they're in charge. And all the laws and rights that we have go right out the window. So what's happened was that back in the old days, it was these intergenerational bloodline banking families that come out of Italy, right? And they've spread all over the world. Now the groups that are trying to rule the world are groups like the United Nations, and the tentacles underneath them, and that includes the World Health Organization and the World Bank, and a lot of these groups that are international in scope. The same groups that were started by David Rockefeller, the guy who on page 405 of his autobiography admitting to forming a new world order and saying that he's proud of it. So that, in a practical sense, like, who's running the world? Is it some interdimensional demonic entity? Maybe. Ultimately, maybe. David Icke and I are friends. We've talked about this, about reptilians and things like that. How far back you want to go, we can go there. But on a practical level, who's running things? The United Nations. At least they seek to. I mean, if it were up to them, they would be running everything. But they're working their way in, and it's not countries. Clearly, it's non-governmental organizations like Gates Foundation, Hewlett Foundation, Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Fund, United Nations. So all these groups, they figured this out a while ago. It's like, if I'm a private company, I can't do this. If I'm the government, I can't do this. If I'm a non-governmental organization, then I'm kind of neither. Then we can do it. So they would start these legal vehicles called non-governmental organizations. And then they would they'd put all their wealth in them and tax shields, and they'd create these foundations that were just a massive tax shield. Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, things like that. And then they would use that as how they spend their money to influence policy everywhere. So it's not Bill Gates doing it. It's the Gates Foundation, which is separate from him. It's his money that he's not, paying any taxes on, that's run through there. And they're using it to fund, and so you go, well, why do we have these? Why would they do this? And then that takes you back to that 1974 Kissinger memo that I mentioned. And in that, he said, when it gets to the point where we're depopulating these 13 countries, we, the American government, can't be seen doing that. That would be really bad. And you, the government of Kenya, as an example, you can't be seen doing that either, because it'll be bad for you. What we're going to do is we're going to have a non-governmental organization, a cutout that's neither ours nor yours, and that group will be the one operating in your country to start the process of family planning, reproductive health, however you want to frame it, but it's depopulation and eugenics. And then that company, the NGOs that they said that Kissinger wanted to use was the World Health Organization. and USAID. And now everyone's like, USAID, they're like running regime change operations. I'm like, wait until you get to the point where you figure out what they were doing with eugenics for 50 years. They're the group that was murdering everybody in the 13 countries. It wasn't the US government. It was USAID and the World Health Organization. And then later in the late 90s, once it was formed, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is now condensed down to the Gates Foundation. So these are the groups. They're designed for the purpose of this, and their purpose is depopulation. That's what the Gates Foundation is there for. It's not there to make the world a better place. They're there to depopulate. That's their goal. That's what they do. Bill Gates' dad was the chairman of the board of Planned Parenthood, which used to be called the American Eugenics Society. So, I mean, I'm not speculating here. I got all the, I got the receipts. I mean, it's readily available information. So these guys are, again, it goes back to like, they'll tell you what the plan is. You just have to listen. And as long as you're not like dismissive of it, like, oh, that's crazy. He must have meant something else when he said we'd lower the population. No, he meant what you thought he meant. He's talking about murdering people. And the fact that Bill Gates is able to do that on a stage and not be led away in handcuffs is crazy to me.
So would you say him and either, well, basically him as in Bill Gates and or um, people who are at the very top of the pyramid of power, if you will? Would you say? I mean, obviously, most people would say that that's outright evil, but would you say? I know you kind of alluded to it earlier, and I have heard other people mention it. Or I'm just baffled that it's even been brought up in such from Catherine Austin Fitz to Ike to gosh, I'm blanking on other people. They've mentioned something demonic. And what's crazy is I have actually become more, call it religious or fill in the blank, as I learn about these things. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really spooky.
And it is spooky. And there's a tendency to be dismissive of it because it's kind of crazy sounding, and you talk about like, well, these guys go out into the Bohemian Grove and they worship an owl and they, pray to Moloch and all that stuff. And it's easy to go, that sounds crazy. That can't be happening. But, or to think it's, they're doing rituals. That's not important. Well, look, it might not matter to you and it might not matter to me, but it matters to them. And because it matters to them, it better matter to us. You know what I mean? Because they're taking this stuff seriously, the occult rituals and all that stuff. People that's the woo-woo that scares a lot of people off when they get into that. And you can have more than enough geopolitical conspiracy topics to keep you busy for a lifetime, that you don't need to ever get into the woo-woo stuff if you don't want to. But it is part of it. And it is deeply important to them, right? The all kinds of really awful stuff that they do. And also, I mean, part of it is what they believe in. Another part of it is entrapment operations where you get people that want to be part of the club and you get them to commit horrific crimes and have that evidence of them, and then they wind up being controllable. A lot of what happens in this world at the higher levels is due to that, either because somebody's got the goods on you or you guys have got the goods on each other. And and that was happening. There's a great part in in Whitney Webb's first book, for One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 1, where she's talking about this party that J. Edgar Hoover goes to at the Plaza Hotel. And party's being hosted by Roy Cohn, who would go on to become Trump's attorney, like in the 80s, before Roy Cohn died. But Roy Cohn was a homosexual man who owned the Plaza Hotel, who was running sexual blackmail entrapment operations out of it at these parties. He was Epstein before Epstein. And he got the goods on J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI. And Hoover could probably have had Roy Cohn picked up for a variety of offenses too, right? So these guys are enemies, rivals. And yet, who shows up at the Plaza Hotel to Roy Cohn's party? J. Edgar Hoover in full drag, dressed as a woman. And the reasoning was, you got the goods on me, I got the goods on you, let's party. We're all really just we're all gangsters. Who are we kidding? We're all organized crime, whether it's government, whether it's Gambino. What's the difference? So that was something I just thought, holy shit. So sometimes these guys at the highest levels, they're all in it. And so they can't come clean. And and if in the old days when it was like, maybe you found out that one guy was cheating on his wife and you had that hold it over his head, or he was a closeted homosexual and you're like, oh, I'm going to out you for this, right? But that stuff is like, fine, I got divorced, now what? Or fine, I came out of the closet, now what? But if you've got the kids, if you've got them on camera with kids, then there's no expiration date. And you become controllable forever. And that information gets shared with other people who buy it. And you get controlled by a whole network of people. And next thing you know, you're just operating against your own self-interest. You're going on camera and saying, there is no Epstein list. And you have to say it, because if you don't, you know the consequences. And so everything we see on TV when these guys do come out there and talk about how they're going to lock her up or this or that, and we're going to, it just feels like theater to me, because I know that these people are saying what they're told to say because somebody above them has the goods on them. And you know, that sounds awful, and it is, but also like, you walked into a trap too, buddy. You part of whoever the person is, like, they have to take responsibility for their own actions. And what I found was that in writing these books and doing the work I do, you make this kind of like assumption that good people who are trying to fix the system go to Washington, D.C. to try and fix the system, because we see that in movies and, old-timey movies. But what actually happens is that Washington, D.C. offers sociopaths everything that they could possibly want. And so it's like a magnet for them. And that what I came to understand was that it's not a black mark on your permanent record to be some dirty pedophile. It actually puts you in consideration for the top job, because they need degenerate scumbags in those positions, and they need to have the goods on them so that they're controllable. So whereas you would assume that I need to go to Washington, D.C. and be like a good guy, like the best candidate, and really nail it on my interview and everything. And it's like, no. You need to go out with the boys later that night and get photographed with a 9-year-old. And then they got you. You need to be a dirtbag. And it's like, why are all these people in Washington, D.C. such fuck ups? It's like, because that's by design. That's who they want. They want these people. And so it's like, once I changed my parameters of like how I viewed things as like, oh, look at all these accidents that are happening. It's like, no. Like the system isn't working. The system is broken. We need to fix the system. And it's like, oh, dummy, the system is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The problem is it was designed to be this way. And so I've had to have this sort of education over time that The system is working just fine. We make the assumption it's supposed to benefit us because that's what we're told, which it isn't. And the people who are in positions of high power are some of the worst people in the world. And they're there specifically because they are the worst people in the world. And they're controlled by people above them who are even worse than they are. And I mean, in that sense, that's just like, that's reality. That's what's actually happening in Washington, D.C. in these groups. It's like, so I think people should understand that before they get into politics in Washington, D.C., because I think it would save a lot of people the trouble. Or they go through law school, like, I'm going to go to law school and then I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to be a lobbyist and I'm going to change the world. And it's like, slow down. You need to understand how the system works first. You ain't changing shit. You're going to go in there and get chewed up or get caught up in some after party. And then you work for these cocksuckers for the rest of your life. Like, be careful out there. You know, there's a lot of people that went in there with good intentions and slipped on a banana peel and wound up in a trap. And these are the worst types of people to be indebted to, because man, they are on a mission to reimagine this world in their image, which means 90% of us have to go. And at this point, they're ready to bring in the robots. And I wish, I wish I had better news, but like, now again, that is their plan. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. They also make a lot of mistakes too along the way too. So I don't want people to feel like it's hopeless. It's like, no, it's not hopeless at all. We just have to be honest about what we're up against, and then understand that they're a big machine that has a lot of cracks in it. And so you know, a lot of the things that they plan they can have a 10-step plan towards world domination, but if they can't get the third step accomplished, then it doesn't really matter, you know. So we threw a lot of monkey wrenches into their plans, I think, during COVID. I don't think that went the way they envisioned it, because I mean, I don't know, maybe it did. Maybe the plan all along was to have Bill de Blasio eating cheeseburgers and selling vaccines. I don't know if that was the plan. That's the dumbest plan I've ever heard. So I like to think that maybe that was plan B, hopefully plan Z, but I don't think it really was. So we have the ability to throw sand in the gears of their operations, and we should. And part of it is recognizing and talking about it. So like, I'm glad that you and I are able to connect and talk about this, because I think it's not something for people to like dread over or to internalize and feel hopeless. It's just information about the current state of affairs. And it doesn't mean that it has to always be this way, but this is how it is right now. And you can be unicorns and rainbows and wish that it was different, but it's not. And so we have to be vigilant and pay attention, and have to understand that that the government hates your guts and wants you dead, and thinks that this governing stuff would be way easier if you weren't around. And so like, when you know that, then you're like, okay, well, like that sort of changes the relationship I have with these people. All right. It used to be that it was like daddy government for some reason. Now it's like, wait a second, like, you're not my dad. Like, I don't want anything to do with you. You're my leaders. I don't need to be led. I'm okay without leaders. Go lead somebody else. Where's the group? Where can I go where there's the group without the leaders? Because if like I tell people, like, when I do the anarchist conference, anarchy doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers. And that's a huge difference, because ironically, the people in the anarchy world don't have rules, but they behave very well. They're actually very self-sufficient and not as people would assume them to be. But the people who follow the rulers, you get what you get government quality outcomes. You get government cheese, government issued jumpsuits, government education, government schools. If you follow those rulers, you're going to get disappointing results. But so many people are afraid to break away from that, or they didn't know that there was an opportunity, an option to not comply. I just tell people, like, do not comply with unjust laws. Just don't comply with them. Don't make a big production out of it, but just to the extent that you can. If somebody tells you that you have to put on a mask to walk into a grocery store, you just don't. You just walk in without it. It's your duty and obligation to do that, and to be difficult, and to stand up against nonsense like that. I remember I remember my own personal protests, like being so offended by the arrows that were taped on the floors in grocery stores, telling me which direction to go down, that I just, on principle alone, I would go the wrong direction down one, just because. Or the dots, where he's like, stand on the dot. I would intentionally not stand on the dot. Fuck your dots and your arrows. I'm not participating in this. I mean, it was like, did it really matter? No, it doesn't really matter to the world in general, but it mattered to me. And it might have mattered to somebody who was watching me from across the produce aisle and saw I didn't have a mask on and had one, and then pulled theirs down or something. You know what I mean? You never know. We just have to act as if, and maybe people will see that and remember that they don't have to do what they're told just because they're told by people who don't like them and don't represent them and don't want what's best for them. So I just, to the extent that we can, like, the sooner we collectively kind of snap out of this government haze that we're in, the better off we'll be. And so I'm hoping that, for all the downside that COVID brought and that 9/11 brought, those were pivotal moments that woke up sizable portions of the population to what was going on. And these people never go back to sleep after that. They're just up. It's like when you just up. Sometimes you wake up and you can go back to sleep, and sometimes you're just up. And if you lived through COVID and you paid attention to what was going on, and that kind of shook you out of all this stuff, you're not going back to sleep. You're up. You're up for good. So good. So do a podcast like you did, man. I think it's fantastic to do it like that, because you lived through it and got inspired to make sure that others could hear voices that had some thoughts on how maybe things will go the next time around. And dude, I'm really glad you had me on, because this is, it's important for us to reach the people that we can, to let them know we're going to be fine. We're going to be good, but we're running out of time. Like, people need to really start to pay attention as they build a digital prison around us and lock us inside, so just eyes open.
You covered several things that I'm just pardon me. I'm just fascinated by. How are you on time? Do you have a few more minutes, or you need me to make a hard stop, or okay? Yeah. So okay. So gosh. Okay. As mentioned, you've covered so many great topics. I could go off on that. So I'm trying to condense it here. As it relates to okay. How about this? David Icke. Would you say he's on the money?
Yeah. Yeah. See, the thing that most people, when they hear David, so when David Icke, the most polarizing topic he's ever talked about are reptilians. And that is like black belt level stuff. You don't drop reptilians on somebody on the first day. It's not good. But as you start to weave through and get yourself a base of knowledge, of information about what's going on and what's been happening, what you find is that there is a running theme throughout history of reptilians. There has always been. It's in artwork, and there's something to it. When David Icke talks about reptilians, I think that in people's mind, they're thinking of like, what you're talking about, shape-shifting reptilians is the term. They think that, like, one time, in 1 minute, you're you're me, and then in the next minute you transform into like a slee stack or something like that. Like and what he's saying is it's not it's not a physical transformation. It's interdimensional. It's an energetic field that comes through that shows what's underneath this persona, what this person is, and this person is showing their self underneath it in a reptilian form. And there's evidence of this throughout the world. A lot of really amazing relics that show all of this. But even in like the city of London, not to be confused with London itself, but the city of London, the financial district, the Mile, as they call it, you're as soon as you go in there, which is the place where all the gold is kept, all of the artwork, all the statues turns to dragons. Dragons everywhere. So there's a theme to it. This goes back to like, how woo woo do you want to get? But like, there's a running theme of non-human interference and what that has looked like over the years. And it's there are some topics out there that are crystal clear. 2 + 2 = 4. Here's the answers to it. And then there's some that are up for debate. And David's work over the years has been, I was joking with him about it a couple months ago when the JFK files had just come out, and they were like, "Hey, we've got all the JFK documents, big release, and it's this and that, and all these revelations." And coincidentally, right when it came out, I had him on my show, and so I asked him how it feels to have all of his work to have everybody interested in this topic and not know that all the information was put out 30 years earlier by you. He put this book came out literally 30 years in 1995. It came out, and it was all of the same information that had come in this big dump of information on JFK. And it was, so he's been, when you're early, you sound crazy. That's just the way it goes. And David Icke was early, and he said a lot of outlandish shit too, which made him sound crazy. But I've known David for a few years now, and have had the pleasure of interviewing on 2 different occasions, interviewing him while I was on the stage at Anarchapulco, and he's behind me on the big monitor because he isn't able to travel because of his visa situations. But where I'm interviewing him in front of a live audience, and we're talking about, I'm taking questions from the audience and doing that whole thing. And I've gotten to know him over the years. He's a tremendous guy. And that's a guy who took a lot of heat early on. He said that he said that he'd be walking down the sidewalk, and there'd be like a mother and daughter kind of coming towards him, like up ahead coming towards, and they'd see that it was him, and they'd cross the street just so they wouldn't have to walk. He was nuclear for a while there in the UK. And to go through that, you got to have big balls. And David has got the research to back it up. He's a prolific writer. He's fantastic. He's a great guy. He's a nice guy. And I think that, he delivered information in a way that I connected with. It just, the way he laid it out and what he was talking about and the way in which he went about it, it went in, and I got it. And so I've been pretty open and about appreciating John Perkins and David Icke for what they were doing, 25, 30 years ago to write these books that changed my life, and put me in a position to wind up doing it later, which is I'm very appreciative of that. And it's nice to have a relationship with those guys. It's a limited one, of course, but just to know them and to get to know, like, what were you thinking when you were writing this? Like, tell me where you were in your life. And, so Yeah, David's books will blow your mind. And you when you want or his videos, you can go watch the I did watch him do a 4-hour presentation in Mexico. I was just right there in the front row watching him, and he was going back and forth on the stage so much that he was just cut, his entire shirt was just soaked. And we were inside like in air conditioning and everything. He's an animal. He's great. So I highly recommend anyone that gets a chance to see him live. It'll have to be in the UK because he's not really able to travel to the rest of Europe. He's been banned in over 30 countries for talking about, you know, what's going on. So anybody who's banned in 30 countries, multiple continents, got to be doing something right in my book. That's how I judge it. So yeah, we love David Icke. He's been a good to us.
You know, I've been fascinated by what he espouses, especially recently. I'd heard of him years ago, and I kind of knew the whole lizard thing and such, and kind of didn't put a whole lot of stock into it. That being said, when I think of religion and all the religions, and yes, there has been a common thread with reptiles or something reptilian in nature, 100%. Then you juxtapose that with the UAP stuff and all the stuff that the testimonies. There was a former Canadian defense minister. So I'm blanking out on the guy's name. Said there's X amount of species. Former Israeli something minister said the same. I mean, they're both deceased now. And then unofficial test, or I don't know what the term is, or the vernacular or whatever, but people saying that there's different species and all the UAP and all that stuff. So if I put the religious stuff and then I put this world that that we still don't know a whole lot about, of course, like the universe and such, and then you have someone like Ike and other people saying that, I know some of this stuff sounds so out there, but when you start to look into, and I'm obviously addressing the audience when I say that, your eyes start to open up. You're like, okay, wow, this is, and what's funny is I didn't feel comfortable talking about this like a month or two ago, like doing a video, but I'm just like, what the hell, I find it fascinating, and just, and I try and be pretty open, like different ideas, and I know there's a lot more that I need to learn, and as we all do in this world, absolutely fascinating. Um, while we're on the topic of Ike and such, one of the things that really struck me, Charlie, when I was kind of reading his book, I think it's called The Greatest Secret. I didn't read the whole thing, but I was kind of reading through it, and something that really stood out to me that just blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. I thought I was going to be reading something that was kind of X Files slash kind of ufology, UAP kind of related stuff, because there's a reptilian kind of thing. And lo and behold, there's a satanic thing. I thought that's like religious. Why is that religious thing being incorporated into something that seems like kind of sci-fi ish, if you will? Not to say that otherwise. And so I was watching a former, and feel free to jump in anytime. I was watching a former Dutch banker. I'm sure if you've seen it, being of course in the space. Uh, Bernard, blanking on, yeah, I'm blanking on the name. Yes, Ronald Bernard. Then there was an Australian lady. I'm trying to think of her name, but she gave testimony, and then a myriad of other things. And then you go on Internet Archive, or you go on what is it? Is it? Yeah, it's. I'm looking at my browser here. It's Yandex. Yeah, some of these, and you start looking at stuff like, okay, wow, there's some like weird satanic stuff going on. And it's like, is this really going? Are they really sacrificing kids and doing that? What is your take on this?
Well, interesting timing because my next episode of Macroaggressions is an interview with Kathy O'Brien, who was an MK Ultra survivor who went through that program in the early 70s and was traumatized and sold to um, powerful congressmen. She was trafficked to Gerald Ford. She was trafficked to George H.W. Bush. She was tortured with an electric cattle prod by George H.W. Bush. She went through the ringer. Kathy O'Brien's a legendary figure. She and David Icke have been working together for 30 years on projects, and I just had the chance to connect with her, and we talked about this. I said, lay it on me. like explain how it all worked. And she was born into a satanic family of pedophile, intergenerational satanic pedophile family who traumatized her. She was then sold into the cult and partnered into the government cult through MK Ultra, and traded and used in Bohemian Grove and as bait for these guys, these scumbags. And she came out of it a survivor, and she's got a really amazing story. It's 100% real. Yeah, she names names. I mean, it is. It's the dark underbelly of Washington D.C. that a lot of people know about, but don't really want to know about and don't think about. And every now and then it pops out. In the '80s, there was the Boys Town situation in Omaha, Nebraska, that tied Reagan and Bush White House to Lawrence King, who is a horrific pedophile child trafficker running out of running out of Omaha. And every now and then you'll get that, or you'll get the DC Madam who starts to out people and then winds up dead. And a lot of the kids that were involved in the Omaha scandal were wound up dead as well. Politicians didn't. Funny how that happens. And then you get an Epstein story every now and then. So from time to time, you start to every generation gets one of these kind of dropped on them, one of these scandals, but nothing ever happens. Nobody, again, they're there. We're ruled by pedophiles and Satanists, and they're there because they're pedophiles, and they're either in the cult to begin with, or, as part of a multi-generational component. You'll find a lot of families that have, a lot of prominent businessmen that are, uh, that you would know of have fathers or grandfathers who are deeply tied into the American government. And like Jeff Bezos, his dad starting, or his grandpa starting DARPA and things like that. Just, what the fuck? Like, how is this possible? What a coincidence, right? And so you go, well, it isn't a coincidence. It's being made to happen. These people are installed and put in positions of power, and the glue that keeps it all together is pedophilia, unfortunately. But that is the way it works, and it keeps everybody quiet, and it keeps everybody in line.
And if you got to pivot, let me know. David Collum, I had him on. He was one of the first people I've had on. He first mentioned the satanic stuff, and it kind of went over my head. Initially, he was showing me like Maria Abramovich, if I'm not botching the name, and other people like that. And then I had an Irishman named John Waters on. I guess he's pretty prominent over there. He mentioned the satanic stuff. I was like, why do I keep hearing this from people? Like, what the hell's going on? So then I start doing digging, and I'm just fascinated by it. I'm like, this shit is actually this is fucking nuts. This is nuts. This is really cuckoo. Uh, and then you mentioned about Jeff Bezos's father or stepfather being involved with DARPA
Yeah, I mean,
or something like that.
these are yeah, these are groups that you know Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump, was was the guy that took the gear left behind by Tesla when Tesla died. You go, again, like, wow, what a coincidence. And you go, it's not a coincidence. There's a certain prominent groups of people that are in positions of power over and over again throughout the generations. And part of how they make that happen is that the older generation traumatizes the younger generation and breaks them, and then molds them into monsters just like them. And then they grow up, and the next generation, they do the same thing. And so it happens over and over again. This is why it's familial. It's this is the intergenerational component of it. Like, what keeps everybody in line? Some of it is marriage, some of it is money, some of it is uh you break the kids, early on, put them into the cult, and they grow up in that world. They never know anything but that. And they're broken from that point. I mean, Kathy O'Brien, that when this interview goes out, it's going to be crazy because I just told her, I said, tell me everything. Like, just don't hold back. And so, like, I can deal with the people hurting each other, the adults hurting each other, but to do that to kids, to do that to your own kids is just unimaginable. And yet that is a common theme that runs through this. And yeah, I mean, John Waters would know from the UK side of things with the care home scandals that were happening in the UK in the 80s and 70s, Dolphin Square. These care homes where boys were being rented out to powerful politicians. Ted Heath was taking them on his boat, raping them, strangling them, throwing them off the boat. As the prime minister of the UK, raping young boys, and then having his henchmen murder them and throw them off the boat because he was too noticeable and prominent that everybody knew who he was, and he literally could not let a survivor live or they'd out you. So, like, yeah, that's how it goes. That's how this stuff works, like at the highest levels. And so, I mean, I think a lot of them didn't sign up for it. They were born into it. I'm not excusing them for their actions. I think when it comes to abuse like that, you get a decision to make. Like, am I going to perpetuate this abuse moving forward on the next generation, or am I going to be the one that stops it? And if and I understand, or I should say, I really can't understand how someone in a situation like that, but victims sometimes victimize other people, and that's what that keeps this whole group in line. And those who get out of line with them, you see what happens to them. If they're in Hollywood, they make them look crazy. If they make them have drug overdoses, they bump them off, they do all kinds of things to them. So it's just been it's a world beyond the world that's sold to us. And once you sort of see it there, it's hard to not know about it. So
Tell you what, I've been glued to this conversation actually before we even started
I know we
turning on the
started off on the
camera.
right foot. We
Yeah.
started chit chatting, and I was like, we should probably hit record this.
Yes, yes, and I'm glad we did that. Wow, this is just so fascinating and dark and enlightening, and this just sounds like a cuckoo movie, like but as I'm learning more and more, I'm not surprised. It makes me wonder, well, what change can I or anyone do apart from sharing and talking about this stuff? You have so many of the key positions of power have been usurped.
Yeah. First and foremost, you take care of your family and yourself and the people who you can reach. You talk to them about what's going on. You explain it the best that you can. A lot of people will be dismissive of it, and you have to prepare for that. But I always think that the best first step is awareness. It's not being black pilled or negative to see what's going on out there. It's being aware. It's a good thing. We should all be aware of what's going on. It's how you deal with it. I think that could be blackpilling, where you just throw your hands up and say, it's over, I'm not going to try. That's not great. But recognizing what you're up against and knowing that that we have to plan accordingly, that's actually empowering. It makes you feel like, all right, well, at least I have a say in this. I can do something about it. Maybe not fix it all, but so you start with yourself and you fix yourself and you fix what you can do. I found that, like, I think local government is way more important than national government when you really I mean, the national government gets all the attention, but the local government is more impactful in people's day-to-day lives. So if you've got the ability to, and I'm anti-government, so I don't think that you can change things
Mhm.
with the big government, but in your local areas, I think you have more of a chance to make some changes if you get the right people in there, or if or maybe just removing the wrong people from there. Certain places have certain ideologies that are just incompatible with logic and reason, like the most of the leftist shithole cities in major metropolitan areas that are just trying to reimagine crime and you know everything, and you just go, you know what, I don't think I want to be here. I think I need to maybe sometimes the solution is you're in the wrong place, and you might need to be somewhere else, and that could take a long time for people to figure that out or make that happen. But if you start thinking about that, I mean, there are solutions out there. I mean, I always tell people to reevaluate the relationship that they have with the bank, because the bank, your bank account is not your bank account, it's the bank's, and your the bank shareholders are in first position, then the bondholders, and then you. Like you're you're not in a good spot when it comes to like your money in your bank account. So if you know that going into it, if you know that now, and you think things are going to get kind of weird with the economy, and I know you've had Dave Calm on, and I mean, he could talk to you about the economy for he can give you the lowdown of like what's coming. If you might want to have your money out of that bank if you know that they passed bank bail-in legislation, which they did, which allows the G9 countries to take the money in your bank account and give it to the banks if they become insolvent, which they almost all are, depending on what sort of accounting structure they use. If they are forced to account for their balance sheets in different ways, they'd all be insolvent. And that would trigger their ability to enact a bank bail-in, which means they get to steal your money. And that is legal. And if you know that and you have a bunch of money in the bank, you need to get your money out of the bank. Not like, like some crazy guy said to get the bank. Like, it's not your money. They will take it. And when you complain about it and go down to the bank and shake your fist at they will say, read the fine print, man. Look at the law. The law says it's our money. And even if the law didn't, your banking contract said you're in third position. You're an unsecured creditor, which means you get nothing. Oh, and by the way, the FDIC has 1.6% of all deposits on hand, barely enough, not even enough to give you 2 cents on the dollar. But all their money is invested in bonds that are upside down. So they're insolvent too. So, like, the banking system is a house of cards. And considering where you have an upcoming, I don't know, let's just call it a questionable economic horizon in 2025, the end of 2025 and all of 2026, reevaluate the relationship you have with your bank and do it now. Oh, and by the way, when you go there and try to remove cash in large amounts, watch what happens. They're going to ask you a million questions and then they're going to tell you no. So it's an interesting time to be paying attention to this stuff too. So we'll leave it on a high note where I'm not dooming and glooming. I'll just say, here's the good news. It's still relatively normal. Sun is shining, birds are chirping, banks are open, grocery stores filled with food. Like, take advantage of it, right? So there's some good news in that. Like, set yourself up for success by recognizing there's some real like weak links in the whole structure over there, and you're like, oh, I should probably stay away from that, the banks or the supply chain. I should probably be a little bit more resilient. So we can, I think, and I'll say to you the same thing that Jeff Berwick and I said in our Controlled Demolition book and in the final chapter, which is there's going to be massive opportunities for people. You watch. In the aftermath of this, in a fourth turning situation where everything gets flipped on its head, Those people who are positioned accordingly and out of the line of fire, and they saw what was coming and they made moves in advance, they're going to have huge opportunities. So there's reasons to be optimistic, but I think again it just pays to be, paying attention and maybe a tiny bit paranoid just to be on the safe side, and extremely distrusting of the government. And I think that's a better. I just say set your default when dealing with the government to, like, instead of like I give them the benefit of the doubt, just set it to they're always lying to me about everything every single time. And if you do that, then the relationship you have with the government will be way better, because at least you won't be caught off guard. You won't be expecting something and getting something else.
So many truth bombs that you dropped. Amen to that. Wow. Charlie, you've been very generous with your time. How can people learn more about you and get in touch with you?
Macroaggressions.io is the website, and that has information about the podcasts. I do Macroaggressions twice a week. I have a show called Union of the Unwanted that I do with Sam Tripoli, who is on Joe Rogan today. Good for Sam. And Midnight Mike and Ricky Varandas. It's a really great group roundtable discussion called the Union of the Unwanted. We started that during the COVID era as well. And you can find out. Oh, and I would suggest everybody that's interested in this sort of stuff, if you're looking for a one-stop shop, a good resource for articles about this, activistpost.com is, I put up 10 articles a day. Activist Post it's a legendary independent news website that had been in operation for 15 years, and until I was honored and humbled that the guys would thought to reach out to me about taking over for them. And so I just love it. It's great. It's a great place to get news. If you're looking for interesting articles and podcasts too, then we've got them over there. So go to activistpost.com. It works well on mobile, but I didn't build an app because you can't centralize control into the hand of the app stores or they'll crush you. So you're just gonna have to pull up a browser, go to activistpost.com and bookmark it. Thanks for having me on. It was great. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, likewise. Really, really appreciate the time that that you gave, and I hope we can make this a regular thing.
Absolutely.
Quick ask: over half of you who watch the show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you've enjoyed the show, you're finding value in it, subscribing is really the best way to support the channel. It's of course free. It literally takes 2 seconds, and it lets the algorithm know that this content matters. And of course, my commitment to you is going to be that I'm going to continue to bring on great guests, refine those questions. And of course, I'm always receptive to your feedback. If there's certain people that you'd like to have on, or certain questions, or this, that, and the other that you'd like to have as part of the show going forward, things of that nature, please let me know. I'm pretty easy to access. Anyhow, that's my commitment to you. If you can subscribe, that would mean a lot. Thanks.